people are doing. So I think it's finally time for what I would consider to be one of the most anticipated camera comparisons between the Pixel 7 Pro and of course the Vivo X80 Pro. Now, both are considered to have fantastic photography cameras. I mean, yes, a lot of things are subjective. I'm gonna leave it at that. We'll see exactly how these two compare. But yeah, this one is probably gonna be real close and it's gonna be really interesting. So let's jump right in. This is a simple shot. And yes, I'm using Zeiss natural colors. We will switch to the AI mode on the Vivo X80 Pro. But you can see that the Pixel, kind of like we have seen it in other camera comparisons as well, it is definitely a more processed, slightly more contrasty, high clarity, vibrant image. And honestly, I don't hate it. In a way, I kinda like the contrast, at least compared to the X80. Moving on, and it's a very similar story. You can see that the Pixel just looks stylized. In a good way. I personally don't really think I prefer one massively over the other because I really like the natural look on the X80. I've been a huge fan of Zeiss natural colors and just the way the X80 makes images look, as you know already. Here's another shot. This one is indoors and you can very clearly see the higher contrast on the Pixel. It's definitely something I really like in this case. Now for a close-up, I do think that the extra clarity that Pixel brings into the images, it definitely helps out, especially in this case. And even though it's kind of underexposing just a smidge, not a lot, but it is underexposing, I do think that the detail levels are really being brought out because of, once again, the extra bit of processing, sharpening, clarity, that sort of thing. Speaking of close-ups, let's also take a look at macro, and in this case the Pixel is completely screwing up the colors. I mean, look, inconsistencies happen to the best, and this is a very clear evidence of that. But having said that, once again, the detail level on the Pixel and the way it really brings it out without making it look too over-sharpened, I'm kind of beginning to, really become a fan of that. The X80 looks nice, and no, the X80 cannot get as close to the subject. Now, as I said before, Zeiss Natural Colors is tried and true, and it is an amazing feature that we have on the X80. But I do want to give the AI colors a proper chance to impress me. So right here, we will switch off Zeiss Natural Colors, and we won't really turn it on, at least for this comparison. And well, the boost in vibrance and the punchiness, it is very much visible, and now the image looks very close for both these phones. Now moving on to this one, and I mean, it's very obvious. If you want punchy images, just don't use Zeiss Natural Colors on Vivo, because then you can get high contrast, very similar to the Pixel, and the vibrance is also going to be there. Speaking of the Pixel, it once again has a severe amount of detail, and I know some parts of it might look a little processed and over-sharpened, but for the most part, it is definitely doing a really good job in bringing out all those beautiful details. Now in this case, yeah, I think the Pixel is kind of, overdoing the saturation just a little bit. I mean, you can see that the X80 with its AI mode, it is definitely giving us a lot of punchiness and saturation, especially with the skin tones. But the Pixel is going a little bit far, like that green in the grass. It's looking a bit nuclear, and I'm not the biggest fan of that. There's an ultra wide shot, and I mean, the biggest thing once again is just how much mid-tone detail is present on the Pixel 7 Pro. Now, in a way, I think in cases like these, it can look really over-sharpened, and the grass looks very whitish because of just how much sharpening is happening on the Pixel, while the X80 is managing to limit that to a fair degree because it tends not to sharpen images almost at all. So yeah, both have their pros and cons based on the way they process images in a way, I guess. But at 2x zoom, we also got optical zoom on the X80 versus a sensor crop on the 7 Pro. Now, having said that, the Pixel's sensor crop is not particularly as good as, something like the iPhone, which gives you basically optical quality. This one, you can see some over sharpening happening, and I mean, it's a minor difference. Once again, like the quality you're getting for what is technically considered to be a digital zoom is definitely very nice. Now for a 3x zoom shot, what the Pixel does here is quite interesting. So it takes some of the data from the 5x optical zoom that it has, and it'll try to sharpen up like the center part of the image, and that much is definitely visible. The goalpost here, it looks almost naturally well detailed like the X80, but the rest of the image, that doesn't look all that good. The sharpening artifacts, the processing, it's very visible, While the X80, because it has 2x zoom, it can just punch in a little bit and give you really high quality images by default. It doesn't need to use software trickery like the Pixel 7, so I don't think the X80 edges out in this case. But then 5x zoom and I think beyond, the Pixel 7 Pro, it just blitz ahead. It's very obvious in this case, I don't even have to explain anything yet. Now for 10x zoom, it's a very similar story. The X80 doesn't even stand a chance in this case, but the Pixel, it goes for a sensor crop once again for the middle portion of its 48 megapixel 5x telephoto camera. So that's, very interesting software implementations here. Now then, for high resolution, well, we don't really get the option to take, 50 megapixel images on the Pixel 7 Pro, even though it is technically capable of it, but we can't really do it. So, this is just a regular 12 megapixel image that we're going to crop into. And I mean, look, the X80 is just not very good with detail preservation. I mean, it's fine, it'll get the job done, but if you're really looking for details, the X80 is just not the way to go. The Pixel, even with 12 megapixels, you can see the detail difference, it's almost not even there. For the ultra-wide camera, you can once again take, I believe, a 48 megapixel shot on the X80, and yeah, once again, we're not gonna see a ton of difference here. I think it's pretty obvious that even though high-res is present on the X80, you're just not gonna get that level of detail that you might expect. But then jumping right into selfies, I think this is where things are gonna get even more interesting, because this is a simple selfie, and I couldn't really take any outdoors selfies because it was so insanely overcast for quite a few days now. But I mean, we're not gonna go easy on these phones now, are we? Which is why right here we have a selfie in a very warm lit situation. I mean, look, both are handling the situation quite well, but differently. The X80, it really compensates for it. It gives you sort of neutral looking images in such warm conditions, while the Pixel, yeah, now that is impressive because it gives you the warmth, it gives you the saturation in the skin tones, and I think in this case it definitely looks better. And well, the lead is just completely and utterly solidified on the Pixel with this image. It's a very difficult image. I mean, you can see the X80 is struggling, and that rarely happens, let me tell you. But the harsh warm light falling from above and the backlit situation, it's just too much for the X80. And the Pixel, it's doing a perfect job given the situation. I mean, this is a very good selfie on the Pixel. Selfies are very impressive. Now for Selfie Portraits, it's basically a similar story. I'm using the crop in mode on the Pixel in this case, and it appears that the noise levels do tend to increase. You can see some extra bit of noise happening on my shirt. But then moving on to once again a warm light situation, and in this case I do think the Pixel is overdoing the saturation a bit. I mean, it is preserving the warmth compared to the X80, which I do like, but it is also making my skin look a little too yellow. Now this shot, I would consider this to be an almost crazy situation because this was terribly backlit with a warm light, and the little bit of light that was actually falling on my face was pure white, which obviously meant that we would get very low saturation in the skin, and that's exactly what happened. Both phones are performing similarly, so nothing really pulls ahead too much. I would say both are struggling quite a bit here as well. Now moving on to night mode selfie. Now this is where the Pixel kind of surprised me, but I guess in a good way, because it didn't have that tendency to really process and overexpose the image like the X80. I mean, in this case you can't even tell that it's a low light image, and I mean, yeah, some people like that. It's a very safe approach to night mode images, while the Pixel goes for a sort of natural approach with keeping the exposure low enough to make it look like it's night mode while also giving us the details. Now for night mode selfie portraits, I think both are doing a tremendous job here. I do like the high contrast on the Pixel, and just a slight bump in saturation in the skin. It does look a little bit better than the X80 in this case, but the difference is pretty minor. Now, as good as the selfies are on the Pixel, I have a tendency to place more importance on rear camera portraits, and that's just not good on the Pixel. The X80 shines in rear camera portraits. I mean, it is incredible at those. And we are using planar portraits on the X80. It just gives you slightly higher contrast on your face, and it works, as you can see. It looks really, really nice. The Pixel skin tones look a little bit more red than they should be. But I think the biggest problem on the Pixel is that it has this built-in crop that just comes in by default. You can't do anything about it. It's like this 1.5x crop in the main camera, and it really doesn't look good. But then if you use a 2x zoom on the Pixel, that's just going to make the situation far worse, because you can see that it just looks really over sharpened and really processed on the Pixel, and it's definitely not how you want your portraits to turn out. The X80, as you'd expect, does a phenomenal job here, and I mean, look at that bokeh in the background. That is just delicious. Now for night mode portraits, it's a similar problem. You know, the 1x zoom is not really 1x on the Pixel, and that does bother me quite a bit. The X80 in this case is definitely going to give you a really processed and really brightened image, and I mean, that's just how night mode is on the X80. And well, the bokeh in the background, that could also be toned down a touch on the X80, but yeah, other than that, the X80's overall image quality is better. And at 2x zoom, I mean, it's very obvious here the problem that the Pixel 7 Pro has. I mean, look at the X80 and the quality of the image that we're getting. The detail preservation is very natural, and it just works really well with the X80, especially with night mode portraits. The Pixel, not so much. Now then, let us move on to night mode. And this is where things get even more heated, because as you can see, lens flaring seems to be a bit of an issue on the Pixel. And yes, I did clean my lens multiple times. It was a similar story. You know, the X80 had no issues whatsoever, while the Google had a few. But other than that, the overall quality of the image is pretty good. I mean, it's not the worst situation in the world. Here's another main camera shot, and I mean, you can see the flaring on the Pixel. Now, the higher contrast on the Pixel is definitely something that I personally like a lot. I do feel like the X80 makes images look a little too flat. How about zoomed in? This is 2x, and yes, the Pixel has that sensor crop, so it should perform really well. At least that's what I thought, and it does perform really well in this case. Once again, high contrast makes the Pixel look so much better. It looks a lot more like nighttime, while the X80 in this case, it looks really flat, and I'm not really a huge fan of that. Even though optical zoom is definitely helping out the X80 with the details. Now this is a 3.5x zoom, and obviously the Pixel is suffering a little because it just doesn't have the detail preservation that the X80 does, thanks to the optical zoom on the X80, but the contrast is so good on the Pixel. You know, I wish the X80 would just give us that level of contrast. I mean, it would be the perfect night mode camera if that was the case. But the moment you hit 5x, the Pixel just takes it. You know, it has a very high quality 5x camera, while the X80, well, it really does not have a very good quality 5x. So yeah, 5x and anything beyond, the Pixel is the one to go for. Now here's another main camera shot, and in the previous shots, I think you noticed it as well, but the Pixel kept cooling things down a lot. I mean, it was a warm lit situation with the streetlights, and the X80 did a good job with the white balance. The Pixel did not. But in this case, the Pixel did do a very good job. It managed to keep the warmth, and it's a very accurate shot on both. So that's just what I want to showcase here. Now here's an ultra wide shot, and this was pretty dark. And in this case, what I really like is that both phones are doing a really good job with making it look like nighttime, especially on the X80. It really looks like nighttime, and it's not looking too overexposed and, you know, too flat. But the Pixel is also kind of oversaturating the grains a little. I mean, look, it might be a minor nitpick, but it is a difference nonetheless. Now this is what I call a crazy shot, because, I mean, look, if the X80 Pro is flaring because of the backlight, then you know that the backlight is a bit too crazy. But having said that, I do like how the Pixel looks here once again. It just has that higher contrast, and it just doesn't look as flat as the X80. That's basically been my complaint throughout the entire night mode thing. But having said all of that, if you go to super dark conditions, nothing thus far has been able to beat the X80. Its detail preservation, the way it can brighten up images and shadows in particular, and I mean, the Pixel doesn't really come all that close. Both of these phones took similar 5-second exposures, and I mean, you can see that the X80 is doing such a better job. Whether it's detail preservation, shadows, again, it blows everything out the water. And that's even true with the ultra wide camera. I mean, yeah, the detail preservation isn't as good as the main camera for obvious reasons, but the Pixel with, I believe, an 8-second exposure compared to 6 on the X80, even then it could not even come close to the X80. So having said that, that right there is the end of our camera comparison. And yes, I know I didn't show off astrophotography or the moon mode. Well, the problem is that it was extremely overcast for quite a few days now, and it's supposed to be like that for a few days more. So I can't really help it, you know. But you know, there are many other aspects to the cameras, and what I think is that the Pixel, it's an interesting camera. I mean, it's probably about as good as the X80 in most cases, except for portraits. I think that was the biggest letdown, because in a lot of cases, the differences that I showed, it was going to end up in personal preference choices. So in cases like that, I mean, you could like the Pixel more, you could maybe prefer the X80 more, that's really going to depend. Even the flat look of night mode shots, some people like that, you know, it's a more processed look, it's a safe look, and maybe that's what you want from your night mode shots, and then the X80 would be amazing for you. The opposite could be true, which is in my case, I really like the Pixel. So I think these two phones, thus far, yeah, they are really the best in photography, and I am really surprised by how good the versatility is on the Pixel, because it doesn't have a 2x zoom, but the 2x sensor crop, it does work really well. Not quite as well as the iPhone, it definitely does pull its weight to a fair extent. I think I still like the X80 a little bit more, you know, the portraits and the way it does regular daylight shots and also ultra low light. Yeah, that's a chef's kiss right there. So with all of that in mind, I still think that the X80 is my personal choice in this case. You know, as I said, personal preference plays a huge role here. So I'll let you guys decide your own. Let me know which one you preferred in the comments. And well, I'll be seeing you guys soon enough with another one. Cheers!